Advancing equity in government services is a major priority for the Biden administration, but to see real results, there needs to be effective action. That's according to Michael McAfee, president and CEO of PolicyLink. It's a nonprofit seeking to advance racial and economic equity. Michael, welcome to the program.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
You wrote in an article that the Biden administration has a once-in-a-generation opportunity to advance equity. Why is now a unique opportunity?
Well, this is a unique opportunity because even though we've made progress in America, nearly 1 in 3 people are still economically insecure. So think about that. 100 million people struggling to make ends meet. And at the same time that we have that startling statistic, we've never had all 3 sectors come to racial equity. We've got government coming to racial equity at every level, corporations, and the nonprofit sector. What people are realizing is that this nation can't be all that it can be when you have 1 in 3 people being left behind from its economic prosperity. So this is why it's so critical. The Biden administration has done something transformative in centering racial equity. And now we can finally realize the invitation that was embedded in our founding to finally perfect this nation so that it is worthy of the multiracial democracy that we have.
Michael, you say this, quote, our government has too often reinforced, if not exacerbated, systemic racial inequality. How so?
Well, when you think about the design of the nation, exclusion was a part of that design. And now inclusion for all must be the part of the design. So think, for example, housing. In the 60s and 70s, my parents wouldn't have been able to buy a home in California where I live right now because of redlining, wouldn't have been able to do it. You think about communities where folks are doing an amazing job helping people get bank accounts, get their credit scores up so that they can buy a home. And then municipalities issue fines and fees that actually strip that wealth away from those families. So the bottom line is government can play a role in working against the very results that it's trying to achieve. And if we can stop that, if we can stop that hurt, if we can stop that intentional or unintentional way we treat poor people, we have a fighting chance to make sure that everyone can participate, prosper, and reach their full potential.
So you outline 4 main actions that the administration can take to jumpstart the process of equity. The first is ensuring that agencies know the full extent of the problem. How do you ensure something like that?
Well, there are plenty of books out there, from The Color of Law. It could go on down the list, but if you started with Color of Law, you would see the elegant design of how housing was constructed to be exclusionary in America. We want institutions to understand the origin story, and not as a way of casting blame. But if you don't understand some of the root causes of the problems today, you actually can't solve them. So we believe that if institutions start by understanding the nation's origin story, their origin story, and the historical context with which we're operating in, we could actually craft strategies that would actually work much better than the ones we have today.
You also recommend that the administration should work to reduce bureaucracy and administrative burdens on people trying to access government services. Do you have specific recommendations on how to do that?
Yes, the first is we should not see people in a hostile light. I mean, think about it. In a pandemic, we were debating whether folks deserve $300 or not. At the same time, we were calling them heroes. That's just unacceptable. And a big example of that is if you look around the country today, you'll see billions of dollars still unspent on rental assistance. Those dollars were let out months ago. But that's a result of how we view the very people who live in this country who are not wealthy. And so what we want this government to do is to not hold a hostile disposition towards for everyday folks, but see them as worthy of the resources that will allow them to move into the middle class and beyond.
Michael, you also recommend that the administration should prioritize increased diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility in government roles. Isn't the administration already doing that?
The administration is doing that, but it's insufficient. More is needed, and it's not a critique of the Biden administration. all of our institutions need to continue to ask themselves the question, how do they renew? How do they renew to be able to do the work that this moment requires? And as this nation becomes a nation of color, we've got to ask ourselves a key question. What happens to a nation founded on stolen land, genocide, and slave labor, has never apologized for it, and the thing that it has never really loved now is getting ready to become the majority in that nation? We've got a lot of work to do to make sure that folks who have been historically excluded now can join in this nation. And so we all have work to do, even at my own organization. I've got work to do for this moment.
Well, you also say that the administration should recruit and retain more diverse federal leadership. Where are the current gaps in that effort?
Well, the current gaps are really having leaders who understand this concept of equity from all races. It is having leaders who are not afraid to talk about that 100 million as I'm talking about them as key to this nation's success. Having leaders that do not shy away from the fact that it is okay to love everyone and to serve everyone in this nation, that is not exclusionary. Having leaders who have that muscle to do that, having leaders who have the muscle to say, let's disaggregate the data and figure out what people need in local context, whether they're in the suburbs, in rural America, in the Mississippi Delta, or in our urban centers.
All right. Well, Michael, I appreciate you being on the program. We'll be sure to be talking about this more. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.